You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Hello there. This is General Grievous, and you are watching the Cantina Club.
Welcome to another episode of the Cantina Club. We are all together again for once, first time in a few weeks. This time we're going to be talking about episode 5 of the Book of Boba Fett season 1, and we'll get into it right after this.
We all know around
we're all one big family. You should do an update on your song. I'm still waiting for the death metal version of our theme song.
We have to do an Ichiwama.
Yeah, Ichiwama. Oh, nice. All right, guys, we're back, and once again, there are 3 of us. We have a full house again, so it's kind of nice to have everybody here at the same time. Gundark managed to slip away from the Pike Syndicate yet again. Like the 50th escape in the last 2 years.
They're just leaving the door open for me now.
But I have a feeling they're probably still hot on her trail. She's not very good at staying away. No. She's good at escaping, not good at staying away.
I'm a master of escape, but really, not evading capture.
Right. Is not a master of evading capture, exactly. All right. So episode 5 of the Book of Boba Fett, season 1. Titled Return of the Mandalorian. So spoilers.
Yeah, that's no way to get around it.
Pretty much right there. The title tells you what you're getting into. And we start from scene 1. You know, it literally opens on basically like a meat, like a butcher shop, basically, with these guys cutting meat, and then we pan across, and right there through the covering, we just see Din Djarin walk through the curtain, as it were, and we're off and running. So he's back to bounty hunting after turning Grogu over to Luke last time we saw him, and now he's back bounty hunting again. And so overall, what do we think of this episode?
I absolutely loved it. It's the best one so far in this series to me, definitely. Although the Tusken attack on the train is up there close.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this one, I was shocked that we had a whole episode with Mando.
Yeah,
I was expecting Mando to come back this episode. I know you guys were speculating about that last time. Didn't really know if he'd be back. Maybe it'd be Grief Karga and his bounty hunting guild that they were referring to at the end of the last episode. But I was pretty sure he's coming back this episode. But I wasn't expecting the focus to be as much.
Same here. I really expected Din to come back. But I didn't expect, again, no, I don't think anybody expected an entire Mandalorian episode, basically. And, you know, what we got was phenomenal. I thought it was great. You know, what you know, not to be negative here, but what does it say that my favorite episode of the Book of Boba Fett didn't even have Boba Fett in it? I think I'm echoing a lot of people right now online that are saying that. Like, yeah, my favorite episode didn't even have the main character in it. So, but yeah, overall, I just love this episode. I thought it was really, really phenomenal, and I found myself sitting on the edge of my seat again and really involved more heavily than I have been in the first 4 episodes. What about you, Greedo?
Yeah, I loved it. And I'll keep it very brief. I've seen it all before, but it was great to see it again. It was great to see it. So well done. From the dialogue to the characters. The only character with excessive dialogue was supposed to have it. Was it Peli Mott?
Yeah, Peli Motto.
It's I don't think I've hidden that she's not my favorite character. I don't dislike her or anything, but it's hit or miss with me with her. And I thought she was just a hit all the way through in this episode.
I agree.
I'll give
really
credit where it's due. And you got that feeling that, like a lot of great Star Wars, they just kind of let her go. Like there was a lot more dialogue in there, and she put the humanity in those scenes of a lot of droids, CGI, special effects, and people in masks, and she held that humanity together it became an important character as a conduit between all these different things, which I didn't think would happen. And I was stunned by the whole episode because I did not see it coming. I did not believe they would give us Mandalorian quite yet, or even at all.
Right.
And as far as Boba Fett not being in it, I have a feeling that was partially by design, because imagine watching that and all of a sudden we switch to Boba Fett. It would have been like, oh,
I'm worried that that's what's going to happen this coming week. I have a feeling that if we just suddenly switch back to the Boba Fett story, everybody's just going to be wah wah.
No,
give us more
Mandalorian. Jump right
Mandalorian.
back into Boba Fett, and we're not going to see Mandalorian, is my opinion. And that way
I think so too.
You'll have to be immersed into it to get to the next thing you want.
Right,
They're very
I agree.
good with the holding the candy out here. And so you got to get through this, and so you get your candy.
Then you get your treat,
and then you get distracted as you're going. Like, we're gonna, hey, he's riding our anchor. Look at that. Before you know it.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
But yeah, so overall, I thought this was a phenomenal episode. But yeah, you made a good point. It's nothing we haven't seen before in The Mandalorian. We see him bounty hunting. We see him, kicking butt.
Cut a person in half.
He's delivering his key phrases. He says the line again. I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold, and then we get him, basically scenes with the armor, which we'll get into, and then we get a flashback in a way to the scene where he rebuilds the Razor Crest with Queel and back from season 1, whereas we're putting together a new ship now with Pelimato. So let's talk about first of all, I guess
of rebuilding IG-11, and there's been a ton of building scenes,
a ton of montage.
Construction
there has been a lot of that. No, you're right. So I mean, I guess, again, not to go scene by scene in the breakdown here, but at the beginning we do see him kicking a lot of butt. He wields the dark saber. He doesn't hesitate from that. As soon as things go down, he pulls out the dark saber and just starts cutting people to pieces, including himself, which he wounds himself on his leg, basically puts a gash across his upper thigh.
I didn't even catch that at first. I
didn't either. I actually thought
I
thought they were saying
he got shot.
Blasted. Yeah, I thought he got shot in the leg. But
that's what I loved about it, is that it was a badass scene, but he was also he was struggling too.
Yeah.
Even he nearly cut his own leg off with the weapon.
He tried to go for his blaster. But the dog, the Nikto or whatever, the dog bit him on the hand.
Yeah.
And the blaster went flying, so he had to do that whole fight with weapons.
And it's part of his character that he gets in dire straits, and and sometimes he gets smacked down, but he always finds some way to come back, although it might just be by the skin of the teeth. And so I love the scene was both badass, but it also kind of showed the humanity of that character, that he's not perfect. He's not a perfect badass, but boy, the way cutting that dude and the whole table in half.
Yeah, and then decapitating him. Yeah, all of that off screen, of course. But
okay, guys. What shocked me most about that was not even so much it was a jaw-dropping moment when he cut a table in half.
Yeah.
But what got me first was when he pulled out the darksaber in the first place. He was just using it for bounty hunting.
Right.
Is that the dark? Is that the sacred darksaber?
The sacred darksaber, using it for bounty hunting.
He's just taking down these butchers in this warehouse with the darksaber.
Well, believe me, the darksaber does not want to be won by a Nikto gangster.
No.
So it's like, use me. If it has a will, it's like, use me to get you out of this situation, dummy. Come on.
Yeah.
I have power. I'm come from that fantasy background, and you do too, of Tolkien and Beowulf, and it's very cool. It reminds me of Stormbringer from.
I was going to say, it reminds me of Michael Moorcock and Stormbringer.
There also is Anglishell from Silmarillion, the dark sword that Turambar wielded, that came from a meteor. The iron came from a meteor from outer space, and it had a thirst for blood. And if you didn't use it enough, or every time you took it out, it could turn on you was the if it was thirsty enough and it judged your deeds as wrong. It didn't like you as a master. It could turn on you.
Right.
And it's kind of cool that they're not really going there, but they're implying it. You know, that you could interpret it that way. I love Star Wars mysticism. I just love it.
Absolutely.
I love it when they don't just prove it. They don't come out and say mysticism absolutely works. But when the people still believe it, you know, and are still exposed to it, it's in the background, it's there. I love that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
It's quite clear from that fight that he doesn't fully know what he has. You know, he can't
he
control
doesn't.
that weapon. And he's using it just because he has to get out of that dire situation. And I love that this sacred weapon. So because I feel like that would be a case in bounty hunting. You know, you're getting in bad situations all the time. You got to go with whatever tool you got, and even if it's this sacred sword,
even if it's a sacred sword of your people. Yeah.
They're also smart enough to know that everything you're going to present in an episode and in a story is a potential source of conflict. And why do we tune in? It isn't to see people happy. It is to see them in conflict and overcome things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, have challenges and overcome them. So they're smart enough to go, well, he's got the darksaber now. That makes him totally badass. End of story. No. There's things that go along with the darksaber that he doesn't.
Exactly.
And we're gonna milk that and make it a plot point and make it interesting, you know.
Yeah. So from this scene, he turns in his bounty and in exchange for information that leads him to a Mandalorian sect. And let's not move into it without talking about the city that he's on. Yeah, I know that's where you're going. That was phenomenal. I love the imagery there.
That just shocked me. I love the ring city in space.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything, although I saw mention online that there's a similar city somewhere in the Clone Wars animated series. I don't remember it or may not have seen it yet.
Clone Wars? I don't know. It's not ringing a bell, but it could be. Yeah.
That's like a new setting in Star Wars. And it was fascinating and it was beautifully rendered.
Yeah.
They obviously put money into the design of it.
Absolutely.
And shooting it. So I love that. And I gotta also say that I love little moments in the city, like when he gets on the elevator with the dude and he's holding the head. And it's one of those awkward elevator moments, but it's like, okay, what would an awkward elevator moment be like if I had a bounty hunter standing
there with a head wrapped in a blanket? Exactly.
That was a great
that was really well done.
The episode was kind of full of little moments like that just added a richness the fun of
it added depth to the story. I love that stuff. Yeah, that was phenomenal. So he does find the sect, which is now down to 2. We basically just got the armorer who did survive. We now have confirmation. The armorer and Paz Vizsla. And to sum it up, she basically tells him, which I thought this is kind of interesting piece of Mandalorian lore as well. She asks him where he got the Beskar spear. And he says that he won that in combat as well. And then she basically schools him on the history of it by saying Beskar is not meant to be used as a weapon because it can pierce Beskar armor. It's only meant to be worn as armor. And he doesn't hesitate. Right away he said, well, then forge it into something for armor. And now we're getting our first inkling that we're going to see Grogu again soon, because he said make something for a foundling, and then long story short, we get to the point where he's like, the foundling that I had, so I thought that was really kind of interesting. Let me get you guys' take on this. I thought it was interesting though that after his journey through the first 2 seasons, and especially with his interactions with Bo-Katan and that group of Mandalorians, that he immediately runs back to this sort of like fundamentalist approach to being a Mandalorian, the not taking the helmet off, and whereas he already had kind of, at least I felt that he had kind of gotten out of that. They had kind of like taken the blend, like, okay, you are the member of I thought that was very strict cult. You're basically a cult member, and we are the real Mandalorians. You're just a member of some crazy cult, not taking off your helmet, doing all this kind of stuff. And he's like immediately runs back to it. It seems like. What did you guys think about that?
I hadn't even really thought about that. That didn't occur to me, and that may be an inconsistency in his development. that it may be that they just decided they wanted to bring the other most popular Mandalorians from the first series back.
Could be.
They just decided to do it that way. Can you find any other reasoning behind it, or is it a weakness?
I mean, I think it's just the fact that I don't know. I mean, other than the fact that maybe he wants, I don't honestly, I don't know. I haven't put that together yet about why he went to them. What's that? Okay. Well, what do you guys do?
This was a major deal for me. And as much as I was enjoying the episode, and I wouldn't change it. Again, I think this is an example of them prolonging everything. Sometimes it's easier. Everything came together at the end of Mandalorian season 2. And we saw in the episode The Believer, and then in The Rescue, we saw Mandalorian challenged in his beliefs, and he had to choose between the creed and his connection with Grogu, and his old goals of his old life of just continuing to fulfill this creed forever, trying to become a perfect Mandalorian, or the responsibility he felt he had that was placed on him by the armor as well. It's an unforgiving creed. It's like, go take this kid back to his kind. But in order to do that, you're going to have to break your vows. So he's in a no-win situation, but he's also coming across characters like specifically Mayfield, really challenged his beliefs and just made a mockery of them and said, people like you make me sick. But then Mayfield is revealed to be kind of a person like him at heart, underneath all the cynicism. And Mayfield even extends to him the grace of saying, I never saw your face and you did what you had to do. Forget it. You know, not really understanding that Mandalorian's probably the guy that's not going to forget that. Even if you give him permission and say, hey man, I never saw your face. He knows that they looked each other in the eye. He knows it happened. Yeah. And so he's going to, under question, he's going to admit it. But anyway, we see in those 2 episodes, him getting torn away from that and what's left, which is, in my opinion, what I took away from The Rescue was there's nothing left at the end of that. When we finally see really Pedro Pascal doing some acting and we see his face and he's exposed, he just takes the helmet off. Like he doesn't, it's not even a question anymore. He's not letting Grogu go without him seeing his face. And it's a throwback to Vader. You know, let me look at you with my own eyes just once. It's the same kind of thing. And there's human connection that he needs. And even though Grogu's not human, but he's, to me, he abandoned the way there, and he knows it. It was a choice he made very clearly. And what we see him with the tears on his face and everything is a guy who's stripped of identity, in my opinion. And I also don't understand. I thought Bo-Katan was going to be ruthless in calling in her debt. I'll help you get the kid, but you got to help me. I thought she wasn't going to let him leave, until she gets what she wants.
Same here. I'm surprised at that.
So yeah, we kind of have an aside here, and we don't know where this Mandalorian, 2.5 fits in Mandalorian 3 yet. He may just be doing this stuff to get some money, and we're going to meet back up with Bo-Katan. We don't really know, but I was surprised that he was so desperate to rejoin the Enclave and the fundamentalist ways, knowing that he had already made his choice, and
but
knowing
was he there to rejoin? See, that's what I'm beginning to wonder now that you're saying that.
Well, we don't know.
I could see that when he never told them right away, I took my helmet off. I'm not part of you anymore. He followed the ritual. This is the way, and had the ritual fight and everything. I can see where it looks like maybe that was his intent to go there to rejoin. But I'm beginning to wonder now if he wasn't seeking them out to figure out what the hell to do about Bo-Katan and his Darksaber.
And the dark side, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, it's more about figuring out more information about getting a different perspective on the Darksaber than what Bo-Katan was telling him.
I think it's what to do next with his life, because if we notice the beginning of Mandalorian, he's just doing bounties, but he's really going underground to get information, equipment, reassurance from this figure, the armor, and from the other Mandalorians. And in order to get that, he has to fulfill the way. They asked him, they kind of judged him when he came in at the beginning of the first Mandalorian episode or second one, whatever it was. And and the armor said, have you taken your helmet off? He said, no. And so then they all backed off. And they said, this guy is worthy of respect. He's true after all, even though he's doing work for these people we don't agree with. And even though he's out there in the world, with the infidels or whatever they are, and he's tainted, he's still maintaining a core of integrity that we can respect. And so, but all through the series, the armor is the one giving him his missions. The side missions are all to do with Grogu and people he runs into, and he has to do this to get to that. But the spiritual core of his identity is coming from the armor every single time. He goes to the armor for, what do I do with this kid? You know, I'm over my head. It's over my head what to do. And she gives him options. And that's another thing that I think is interesting about the armor. And except for the hardcore rules, she always gives him a choice. She even said in this episode when Paz Vizsla challenged him, do you want this duel or not? I think she was forcing their hand on that. I think she wanted the duel to happen, but she gave him a choice, you know, until it comes down to these like 3 rules they have or whatever. You don't get a choice on those. But every other time she said, you can make the kid a foundling, or the only way the kid's going to be safe is if you return him to his own kind. There's always options, but she's the guidance character. And when he's stripped of identity, I think he went running back to try to find them, to find out, what am I now? You know, what do I do next? I've returned the kid and I'm lost. You know, the saber's fighting me because I'm out of focus. Help me focus like I used to, you know? And so I think it's a regression of running back to what is safe, which is what any, you know, cult member would probably do, to look for that guidance when you're unmoored. What surprised me was how kind of unmoored he seemed, and how much they were willing to kind of lay on the Mandalorian Enclave to move the story forward, when I thought they were finally going to move past it. To me, to me, it bothers me a little. I'm not going to judge it or anything, but I didn't want to see him back in the helmet all the time.
Same here.
It feels like the pressure is to stay in that helmet, to still be this character, go back to this character we saw in episode 1.
That's another reason why I think I was surprised that he went back to that, because I think just from a story standpoint, I thought we had moved to the point where, we're not going to see him constantly with his helmet on anymore. And who knows, maybe that's not even a story point. Maybe that's, you know, something, I think you and I talked about that, Greedo, that maybe that's more of a scheduling thing with Pascal, you know, Pedro Pascal. Maybe he's not available as much, so they can't have as many helmet off scenes. You know, it's an easy way to, all they have to do is bring him in to do looping at that point. And it
could be, you know, Pascal's committed for a long time, so it could be, let's kill some time. That's what I said. To me, it kind of seemed like a move to, okay, let's go back to before he had the helmet off, and let's draw that out so that we can bring him around again and bring him the helmet off, and finally getting past the way and all that. But damn, it was so strong. It was just freaking strong. I also want to point out where this scene is so intense. There's so much in this scene. We haven't even gotten to them fighting over the Darksaber and stuff yet. But the thing that's interesting to me is this armorer character. She's the core of this, but she's leading them down this hardcore way. But there's literally 3 of them left now. So it's like Moses coming out of the desert with 2 tribes.
With 2 people
instead of 12.
Exactly.
I mean, she is an unreliable narrator. And we get a lot of the Mandalorian's core point of view comes from her in the first half of this episode. But she's an unreliable narrator. And even to the point of that, we get this epic scene when we're at the point where she's reforging the spear, what you're talking about. And it's like she casts a magic spell, and for one of the first times ever, we'd have to do a count in Star Wars how many times we see a montage of things that are not happening now. And they're not watching them on a video. We just get fully immersed in this throwback with her voice guiding us of how the Night of 1,000 Tears or whatever it was, where Mandalore was flattened. Awesome freaking scene. But I'm also wondering, is that really what happened? Did it look that way? Or are these Mandalorians, when she starts talking, they summon these images that are so powerful for them because they've been told it over and over again. Was there really that many TIE fighters? Or in their mind, was it such an incredible event that this is the only way they can envision it, the horror of it, the scale of it? I have a feeling it's accurate, and it was beautiful, whatever it was, terrifying and awesome. But I also feel like she's an unreliable narrator, and everything she says is questionable. She doesn't explain why they were on the moon of Concordia. They may have been in prison, you know. They may have been hiding there because they were part of Death Watch. And she puts the blame on Bo-Katan, which is just frankly kind of silly, you know. The whole the saber wasn't one in combat, therefore our whole planet was annihilated.
It's a cautionary tale.
But she also she says it's a cautionary tale, but she never says, because Bo-Katan claimed the leadership, we were flattened. She says, a prophecy says, if you try to do that, our people will be scattered. Well, coincidentally, that's what happened to her worldview. this works out perfectly.
It happened because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, but she doesn't come out and specifically say that.
Right.
She leaves it. The wisdom is just sitting there, like, it seems unassailable to me, you know.
Mhm.
But we have two characters here that if they ever bring back Bo-Katan, we got two characters kind of on either side, either shoulder of Din Djarin, both of which are unreliable narrators. And so to me, when you get to that point, he's got to start making his own decisions.
Yeah.
But right now, she just did the typical thing of, this is your mission, this is the way. You got to go find the mines on Mandalore in order to redeem yourself. And he's just going to run with that and try to do it because that's his character. He just plods forward. He's the bounty hunting tortoise, you know, that wins the race eventually.
Yeah.
He's got the shell that deflects all the blasters. He's not the hare. He does everything at his own pace, but he gets it done. But anyway, I don't want to keep talking about that. I wanted to make those points.
No, those are good. And you brought up the whole montage of the destruction of Mandalore. So let's talk about that scene. For me, that was one of the most powerful images I've ever seen in Star Wars, ever. I mean, just, you know, I know that everybody is kind of, it's just, you know, basically like a Terminator shot, you know, just put in the Star Wars. Yeah, maybe so, but I don't care. It was amazing. I thought it looked incredible.
It totally worked. Yeah.
But just with the way those TIE bombers were coming over and just blowing everything up, and then that wide angle shot with the probe droids and the K2SO model droids walking on, blasting whatever had survived was just unbelievable. That was just goosebump inducing.
Yeah, K2SO. This was my old job.
And you know, that kind of points out what's the highlights of the new things in Star Wars and the TV shows. We're getting a lot more flashbacks and we're getting a lot more montages that really weren't in these shows. You know, montages.
Yeah, a lot more breaking the cinematic rules of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah,
right.
And that was one that just worked beautifully, and it gave depth to what happened to Mandalore that will set up, I suspect, what's going to be the central storyline of season 3.
I do submit though that
I think so.
That the way they did it was so clever. There's because she's talking and she's forging a weapon, and it really felt like she's a witch or a shaman casting a spell, and they all saw it together. So I think we're seeing what's in their minds. You know, I don't know that that's literally exactly what happened, but like I said, it's such a powerful story for them that anytime any respected personage starts talking about it, they all probably stop and listen and summon up these images.
And that's the image they get.
As if they were there. Yeah.
Right.
And I also wanted to say, just a quick aside, I love the way that he beheaded the guy in the first scene without showing it to you. There's visual things they did in this episode that to me elevated it above most of the other episodes we've seen of Book of Boba Fett. When you get the Darksaber flashing through the curtain and then he comes out with the head, you know, you don't have a doubt for a second what he's doing when that flashes. Right. But little kids watching this episode don't have to see Mando behead a corpse.
Actually beheading a corpse.
Right. And then they never show it come out from the bundle, but we know what the bundle is.
Yeah.
But it was done so well that you don't even mind because it's clever. It's just freaking visually clever and beautifully executed, which we haven't seen a whole lot of that. And then we have this flashback sequence, which violates the cinematic rules of Star Wars, but it's done in such a clever way. It's like the shaman casting spell. Anyway, those two visual cues, and there's more in this episode, but to me, that's the things that make it stand apart from a lot of the stuff we've seen so far.
Since we're talking about how clever it is, I do want to give props to Bryce Dallas Howard because she did direct this episode. And you know, she had directed several episodes of The Mandalorian, and it's kind of interesting that they gave her a Mandalorian episode to direct, and she did a wonderful job with it.
And how can we not mention the other visual cue, which is the unbroken shot of him walking the whole ring column.
Right, that was phenomenal. I love it.
It went on for over 2 minutes.
Wonderful long take.
And and you can imagine them moving the sets and the screens and the backgrounds as he's walking, and if they did it all in one shot like that, it took a lot of effort and planning. And again, it's just showing a different level of commitment that does not feel disjointed. It feels purposeful. It feels well done. And it's not just Mando showing up. It's making this episode feel different than the other ones we've seen in this series.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. So
can we bring up one more thing about, I can't remember if this is before or after the fight over the Darksaber, But since you're talking about the armor, there's something else she brings up about the history of Mandalore that really struck me, where another prophecy. I think it was, she said, whenever the mythosaur reappears.
Oh yeah, there's like I said, there's so much
lore in
the
this.
Mandalore will rise. Now, is that, we know that Boba Fett rode a mythosaur in the Star Wars Holiday Special. So is that bringing Boba Fett into the Mandalorian prophecy about what's going to happen to?
It could be. They might be going that route.
Is that going to segue then?
Isn't it the mythosaur skull that's the Mandalorian symbol that Boba Fett wears on his armor?
Yeah. So I think maybe that's setting up him to play an important role, maybe even in the third season of Mandalorian with the.
He's going to be busy riding a Ranka, though. How many beasts is he supposed to ride? A bantha? Go make little mythosaurs.
I just wondered. I thought this too specific a reference has got to have something to do with bringing Boba Fett into the mythos of Mandalore in some way. So.
And the way the history of the show goes, anything they drop like that, I think they're going to show eventually.
Yeah.
I wouldn't doubt it. And that's another thing. How much exposition was in this episode, and yet no one's complaining.
No.
It was nothing but exposition. I mean, Mando had every single thing explained to him everywhere he went.
Yeah.
And they even brought back the tracking fob. I don't want to backtrack at this point, but I was shocked by that too, because I thought that bad idea was just jettisoned. Like, when the Bounty Guild fell apart, the whole tracking fob technology just stopped working.
Whole tracking fob.
It's dumb. It makes no sense. Yeah, it makes no sense that it realized it and it stopped working.
Okay, so I'm gonna win the nerd badge again this week. That was actually not a mythosaur that he rode in the holiday special.
Oh.
No, it was a creature called an ichthyodont.
Okay.
Of course. How come I didn't know that?
How did you not know that, guys? You guys are on a podcast and you don't know that? Get out of
it. You get the nerd prize.
I get the nerd award for the week.
Probably because there wasn't an ichthyonaut 20 different toys for me to collect when I was young. That's probably why I don't know.
A mythosaur.
I got to go with Quill on this one. He said, "I have spoken. Your ancestors rode the mythosaur." I think he meant the holiday special, so I'm going with Quill.
Yeah, but yeah,
you have to say "I have spoken" after everything to make it seem more official.
Well, a mythosaur, and I'll put up some images here, looks very different from what he wrote in the holiday special.
Where?
I'll put the picture up.
Canon.
Yep.
Yeah.
You'll see it. Watch this episode of the Cantina Club, and you'll see it. Yeah. Gundark.
Do you guys also think there's anything to this coded dialogue that the armor always seems to use about? Sadly, the mythosaur is just a thing of legends, and legends is the thing that Star Wars refers to previous comics and books and things. Do you think they're coding their dialogue like that on purpose?
Probably.
I think they probably are. Yeah, they don't seem to do anything without a purpose like that. Yeah, I agree. So let's get to the actual fight. So Paz Vizsla challenges the Mandalorian to a duel, basically, because you got to think he's obviously a Vizsla. He's from House Vizsla, which another piece of lore that we discussed here with the armor. She basically lays out that this darksaber, was created by, the name escapes me now, but the Vizsla that was part Jedi and part Mandalorian. He was also
so many
Jedi. There was a lot
in this one scene.
And so obviously Paz Vizsla is a direct descendant. It's now been established that he's a direct descendant of that Vizsla. So he wants to challenge Din for the darksaber, which they
also,
of course,
right
fight.
Before that, they had the training sequence that she exposed that he's not good with the saber, basically.
Right, that's a good point. That he complains about it being very heavy, and she says, "Well, that's because it's fighting against you."
She whooped his ass.
Yeah,
she whipped his ass even in training.
You're fighting against the darksaber.
He said, "I want to keep training," and she said, "Training is going to do you no good until you resolve what the actual issue is."
You're distracted and you have no focus. Yeah, exactly. So we get to the duel. They fight it out. It goes, kind of goes back and forth until ultimately, Din gets the upper hand, has a blade at Paz's throat, and the armorer stops it and said, "Okay, it's done." And I thought it was interesting.
I want to point out some that Paz picks up the darksaber and has just as much trouble lifting it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
he
yeah.
did.
That is a good
Mando,
point.
as
Yeah.
Mando
He had just
did.
as much
And so
trouble.
it really doesn't come down to who has that in their hands. That actually is a
Right.
detriment.
That's a good point. Yeah, that is a good point. But I thought it was interesting that, once she calls the fight done, Din and Paz are still standing there. And she asks Mandalorian the questions, have you removed your helmet? She asked Paz that. He said, no. I asked, Din, and of course he hesitates because he has, he knows he's broken that code, as it were. And so he hesitates. And then she says, very sternly, well, then you are a Mandalorian no more. So he asks immediately, how do I make up for this? But I thought it was interesting that in the middle of this conversation with the armorer, you hear Paz say, be gone, apostate, calls him an apostate for taking off his own. So it really shows you the difference between this sort of cult mentality versus the mentality we get with the other Mandalorians on the show.
Dudes, there's only 3 of them left, okay?
Yeah,
they only
exactly.
have 2 left.
Yeah,
and
yet he wants to be down to 2.
Yeah,
exactly.
They're willing to cast him out. I mean, think of the fanaticism.
That's how hardcore they believe in this stuff.
Yeah. But the thing I liked about that fight was Paz Vizsla really had bitterness. I like how that character was the one who was talking smack the most to Mando in the first season, was constantly challenging him, but then he went and saved his life.
Yep.
But he's not somebody to play with. If he doesn't approve of you and anywhere he wants what he wants, he's gonna say it. So I like how they didn't soften up the character after he had stepped in to save Mando. He still had a great deal of bitterness, and he wanted that saber, and he thought he was entitled to it because of his family name and because of the fanaticism associated with the sacredness of that saber. And he showed a lot of anger and bitterness against Mando in that fight, and especially just labeling him apostate and get out of here. So I wonder too that far with the character.
I wonder too if that guy is getting a little upset with their downturn in fortunes. I mean, he's following the way, and they've gone from
and he's not,
an enclave to a couple of people they've had to flee. The Imperials killed a bunch of them. Things have not gone the way I'm sure he envisioned things going, and then a guy shows up with the Darksaber. He's like, all this stuff's been happening while I've been following the way.
And he's an apostate who has the Darksaber.
Why didn't the way take me to the Darksaber?
Right.
Give me my chance to get it, and maybe here it is now. But
and
I also want to point out,
I'm direct bloodline from the creator of this. Yeah, exactly.
That's the main thing. And I also want to point out that the armor arranged all this. The armor set those two against each other. Even knowing that these are the 2 allies she had in hand at the moment that she can totally control. The way the armorer does her voice is so awesome because she just seems like she's just dreaming the whole time.
Yeah.
She states everything, the most horrible thing as if it's okay, and she states the great things as if it's okay. And she's just dreaming like a complete fanatic, and whatever will be, but she's clever in that she set those 2 against each other. And she seemed to give them choices, but she, from everything they know, they were kind of pushed into that.
Right.
And so I think it's interesting that she is somewhat adversarial for the first time with the Mandalorian. And anyway, I thought that was interesting. I was wondering what she was trying to accomplish. Did she really want Paz Vizsla to win the saber? And then there's someone she had more under her thumb and that she thought was, be a better fit, or was she just letting it happen because the way leads to what's supposed to happen? I'm really not sure.
Right.
And you notice she never tried to take it for herself.
No.
She could have challenged him because she was whipping his butt.
After he was revealed to be an apostate, there was no discussion of you've got to give it back.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I'm thinking that maybe she's wanting him to find himself, and maybe even to recover the way. And hence she gives him the task of the way to recuperate yourself is to go to the mines under wherever it was in Mandalore. But I don't know. The whole sequence though I was surprised at how bitter it was in terms of the feelings between some of the characters.
I think there's going to be a lot of that. It started with Bo-Katan.
Yeah.
when he defied her directives and fought Moff Gideon, you could see the frustration and greed in her face. I was going to compare the armor, say the armor is like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, the guide or whatever. It'd be like Gandalf taking out the ring at the Council of Elrond and saying, the strongest can take this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like challenging them to fight.
Yeah, Gandalf would never do that. It's like Frodo had the ring and he said to Boromir, it belonged to Isildur, your forebear. I'm just saying. If you wanted to try to go take it, you're entitled. And then just watching what happens next. I mean, that's pretty sinister, when you're talking about so she has a bigger picture faith that they're all obviously expendable. Right. And also we saw her plenty capable of taking care of herself with no protection. Like when the stormtroopers all showed up. Oh yeah. She just wiped the floor with all of them. She just
wiped the floor with all of them coming at her.
She fears nothing, Right. She doesn't necessarily need them. But anyway, I just think that they did so much with this scene. Yeah. And I also want to discuss this implication. I thought it was an implication because I go by this kind of rule that if they mention it, it's important. Unless it's a throwaway joke or whatever. But if there's reasons these scripts get whittled down to the important things and concepts that are thrown in for later. And I know it's lore already, but there really wasn't a reason for her to bring up the master of the originator of the Darksaber was both Jedi and Mandalorian. It was a lot of exposition in that scene, but I feel like it was put in there for a reason. And I think this is part of why Din Djarin is struggling with the saber so much. Because he did win it in combat and he does have integrity, but I think they're implying that the one that's going to fulfill this prophecy, and I don't want to get into all these chosen ones and prophecies that have caused so much craziness in Star Wars, but to the armor's point of view and to the Way's point of view, maybe you need someone that reflects that originator that has the Force and that has heritage of the Force and heritage of the Mandalore. And at first I thought that's Grogu, because they even went out of their way to say the armor herself dubbed him still a foundling. She approved of him as still being referred to as a foundling. She said, he's a Jedi, they forego attachment. And he says, but I still want to bring him something. He says, okay, for the foundling Grogu, which she's still thinking of him as a foundling, which means he's still potentially on the way.
Right.
But we were talking about his age, and we're talking about 100 years down the line. He might
That's
be the
the thing,
one to wield the Darksaber.
He's technically 50 years old, but he still acts like a 4-year-old human.
So then I
basically.
thought, of course, Din and Grogu have a connection, and together they fulfill that requirement of the father figure and the foundling and his foundling. One has a connection to the Force, and one has the strong connection to the Mandalore way, and together they fulfill that requirement.
And another line that's really important, I think, in there that's not a throwaway line is when she says that the Jedi way doesn't approve of attachments.
It's the opposite. He goes out of his way, so that's the opposite of our way.
So it's bringing up a conflict between Mandalorian ways and Jedi ways that somehow that's got to be united for the future storyline of Mandalore to take place, I think. There. So something's got to happen with Grogu coming out.
So let me get your guys' take on what you think she forged for Grogu.
I think the
chainmail. I think
it's chainmail.
I think it showed little rings.
It showed little rings at one point. Yeah.
So I think it's a little chainmail, a Beskar to protect him whenever he's fighting with the saber.
Yeah,
it's either that or a necklace.
Right, I thought about that too. I was thinking it's going to be some sort of attachment for his lightsaber handle.
That could be as well. A belt, a belt for the. But I do think chainmail would make the most sense because the things are going to escalate from here, and if Luke's going to be comfortable letting Grogu go back with Mandalorian, and they aren't adversarial in that, then if Grogu has some armor, they specifically mentioned armor, so I think it's an armor of a type. And so you got him with some kind of protection where he can get hit by the stray blaster or the stray saber or whatever, and potentially be okay. So I think that could end up being important, but it's going to be weird if they change his character design. Like, here's your little helmet. It's too expensive to animate his face. He's actually in a contract dispute, Grogu. So we're going to put him behind.
Yeah, they're not going to put a helmet over their cute moneymaker.
No.
So Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I think it was probably chainmail, but it was awfully small, whatever it was. So I don't know.
Yeah, it literally fit in this little bitty thing about this big from that huge
and the
spear.
armor, for convenience sake, for the show's sake, showing some heart by shaping it like Grogu's head.
Yeah, I was noticing that too. It looked like a little
didn't
mini
seem like the
version of
armor
Grogu's head.
just
around
for
with these
fun,
two long ties coming up.
Just for my crafty side. I know I'm always making weapons and metals, but just for my crafty side.
Yeah,
It looked like his
exactly.
little head. It's like even the armor is affected by Grogu's charms.
All right, so moving on to the next section of the story, Din is headed to Tatooine. And we did have a funny scene that I also thought was reminiscent of Lord of the Rings when he had to turn over all of his weapons and put them in a checked bag, which I thought was hilarious. He literally has like this blaster and that blaster and this knife.
As far as to run out the cable.
Yeah, exactly. He just shot the whole cable out.
TSA.
Yeah. And even the little, what do they call them? The singing birds or whatever. You like, like all like 30 of them came falling out.
And I love how he tried to get away with it. Like, what weapons? I'm a Mandalorian. Weapons are part of my religion. And they're like, no,
it doesn't matter.
That didn't go fly.
It's like, this bantha is my emotional support animal. What are you doing?
No.
So he, and then we also get a little shot of him, a couple of shots really that show that are kind of alluding to him missing Grogu. There's one of him just sort of longingly looking out into space at the vastness of the stars and all that. And clearly it was implied that he's just thinking about Grogu and wondering where he is right now. And then we get the shot of the little baby Rodian.
I did want to bring up one thing real quick.
What's that?
I wanted to bring up one thing real quick,
Sure.
Specifically in that scene you just referenced. This was another point to me that elevated this episode above some of the stuff we've seen. The soundtrack was awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The soundtrack in that moment was incredible, and throughout this episode, the soundtrack cues are extremely well done. Yeah. And it was another thing that made you feel like this is a well-oiled machine that's hit the ground running. And I just felt no disjointedness. I was right on board. When the music is not intrusive, but it's cueing you into what to feel, and you're already feeling it anyway. Yeah. Everything's working together. And that was a scene that I've watched this a couple of times now. And I realized the second time watching it, how much I was affected by the soundtrack the first time without even realizing it, when they showed that close up of the little Grogu faced bundle. And so they're making the most of their opportunities in this episode with all those things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
I'm sorry about the Rodian.
No, not at all. Yeah, so we just got the other scene with him talking, or sort of interacting a little bit with the Rodian kid in front of him, who's leaning over the seat and waving at him and all that till his mom makes him sit down. So he basically gets to Tatooine and goes straight to Pelimato, telling her, "Oh, we of course we have the scene of her chasing down a little womp rat or whatever in her, and that's how he makes his entrance, because he's the one that comes in."
I like that because I was shocked that the womp rat nearly ate her alive.
Yeah, the womp rat's strong. He like grabbed her and was pulling her behind the boxes.
Womp rat?
And then he comes in, boom, and she even points that out. Of course, like, wow, what an entrance. You're right. Greedo, her character really. I'm kind of the same with you. She's hit or miss with me. Sometimes she works, sometimes her character doesn't. This one I thought she was just right on, and I thought it was hilarious how she's like, "Hey, look, everybody, it's Mando."
Yeah, everybody's like, "Oh boy!"
It literally was almost like it was like a sitcom almost. Look, you're right, man! Yay! Like everybody, like the audience claps at that point,
Yeah.
Like
it's like Mr. Jefferson walking in on All in the Family.
Filmed in front of a live studio audience, and Din walked in, yay! Look, everybody, it's Mando. Anyway, I thought that worked. I thought it was well done. At this point we get the fact that he got a message from her that she's got him a replacement for the Razor Crest. In his mind, she thought he meant another Razor Crest. However, that is not what she had. She ended up basically getting one of the Imperial fighters, or not Imperial fighters, one of the Royal fighters from Naboo. And according to what she said, commissioned by the Queen herself.
Which
but it's
queen?
in
The elected one.
Complete disrepair. It's in shambles, and she excuses that, but said, well, you came quicker than I thought. I hadn't got to work on it yet, and it would go faster if you helped me. So they do have a back and forth where hands him the wrench, but she basically, they do have a back and forth, because originally he's like, no, this is ridiculous. I'm not flying this stupid thing. Give me my money back, and I'm out of here. I don't have time for this.
She just lured him in, just took control. It's a good thing he's not a gambler. He would
he would have lost everything.
He gets owned by everybody. Never cross Luke, because the Jedi mind trick's going to rack him up. Because he's very susceptible to the mind tricks.
Right.
It's more like he's an okay guy, and this stuff just tests his patience.
Yeah.
And once you get him on board, he kind of forgets that he was impatient about it and gets involved.
Right. So we get the building montage of them putting this ship together. They ultimately get it there, and then we've got another foreshadowing, I think, of what we're going to see, whether the end of this season or next. We get the astromech droid port in the ship. He said, why did you I don't know how you worded, cap it off, or how did you, why did you do that? She goes, well, you seem like a do-it-yourself kind of guy, like you're not going to really be relying on an astromech droid to fly around, space in. And to me, that's just setting up the perfect spot for Grogu to be riding in, because it's literally like the dome right behind where he is. I can already see the next time we see Din Djarin. Yep, there it is right there.
Yeah.
He's flying in, and then we get the close-up of going right to Grogu, going, looking at everything. I can absolutely see that.
That's what I expect the next shot of Mandalorian's appearance to be.
That's what I'm saying. Next time we see Mandalorian, it's going to be a shot of that.
I think he's going to come flying in and take out the Pike's ship or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I could see that.
Can I say something about the building montage?
Of course.
That was a lengthy sequence, but I loved every minute of it.
Me too. Yeah.
Peli, like you said, Peli Motto, she was also an acquired taste for me. She was kind of annoying to me in her first appearance in Mandalorian. But in this episode, the dynamic between the two of them just synced perfectly. It was like two old acquaintances.
I'm getting that vibe now.
Conflict, they got some conflict, but they also know how to resolve it. And they're going to eventually have fun putting this thing together. And I had so much fun watching them. It just lifted my heart so much because they were enjoying it. And then whenever they finished it and he was running his hands over the vehicle and stepping back and looking at it, and she was looking at his reaction, it was like, this is Star Wars love of space vehicles.
Absolutely.
It got
and
my heart.
Hot rods,
and hot rods.
I
got
garage.
Very much got the hot rod vibe.
Yeah, George Lucas's hot rodding days and drag racing days. It felt like Star Wars.
Yeah,
really,
I think it's very interesting too, because they're continually taking every opportunity to show people doing things, building things, learning things, passing on knowledge.
I love that. Yeah.
Boba Fett has more pride in his gaffy stick because we saw him build it.
Right.
And we saw the interest, just the intensity it took from him to learn that skill. And they showed it to him, and he took every step after being shown. It wasn't easy, even though they have to rush through it. We can feel the weight of it.
Sure.
And when a character builds a spaceship and puts it together, it just means more than here's your next Razor Crest, like nothing ever happened. And I also wanted to point out that one thing I thought was fantastic. Again, the soundtrack was just awesome in this episode all the way through.
Yeah, all the way through.
And it was great through this part. But there's something in this episode that just works on all cylinders at all times. And you cannot... I don't know how you just make that a formula where it works every single time. I don't know how you can, because we can go back to the prequels where a lot of these droids come from, and you've got plenty of busy scenes in Star Wars where characters are doing something and there's things to remind us we're in the Star Wars galaxy, scampering around, there's parts laying around, there's things around in the background, and it's great for Easter egg hunters and stuff. But this really felt organic, like all the little creatures scampering around. When she came across the nest, when the guy was sticking his head out of when they take the dial out and the little creature would stick its head out. This stuff could be tiresome. It really can. We've seen it fail a lot of times. We're just kind of going, or a little cringy, or shrug your shoulders. Who cares? To me, it just felt awesome. Like
Yeah.
it felt like a real environment. I was
Mhm.
interested in what all these little creatures were doing. I was interested in what all the droids were doing, the dynamic. And again, it made her character so important because Mando's kind of the skeptic being drawn in, and she's the one providing the human contact and the translation and everything to how all these different moving parts work. This is her environment she's in. She's familiar with it. And it just really worked. That's one thing I wanted to point out is all the little side creatures, all the stuff that could be, like you put one extra side creature in the long shot, it's too much.
Mhm.
But they had one, they had one like looking around it, and it's almost like they said, no, less. And they got it just perfect, and it just, for some reason, it all worked. And the
It really
humor
did.
worked and
Yeah.
everything for me. I'm
Yeah.
very shocked.
No, yeah, I agree. It was one of those episodes where everything sort of came
Mhm.
together, and even though like you alluded to Gundark, you said it was a very lengthy building montage, but I was into it the whole time. I never once was looking at me, like when is this going to be over? I thought it was great. I loved every aspect about it.
And the BD droid was great, and the shot of him wriggling his little legs in
Mhm.
excitement when he helped Mando put the piece on,
Right.
was just perfect. I mean,
I loved
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
you can be a cynical, jaded a-hole and say, oh, come on, I want more badass Star Wars, but that stuff's just great. I mean,
That's a
that
great
is Star
point.
Wars.
That is
Yeah.
one of the central complaints about this show. They want more badassery, but you don't necessarily have
No, you
to
need
have
charm.
that all the time.
You need charm,
You have to have charm. Yeah,
need
absolutely.
like a real human connection, and I felt the
Mhm.
connection between all the characters in that
Right.
montage.
Right.
No, the badassery should be sparingly used, just like Darth Vader or something, to make
Yeah.
it more intense, more memorable, and not just it's happening all the time and you could just take your pick of which part. And they do that stuff judiciously. It just needed a touch more of it in the Boba Fett episodes. But when you have these Star Wars elements working and it's charming, and they somehow knew, let's bring the BD droid into this to bring something new. We have a new little twist, a new little character. Let's bring the Womp Rats in a little bit more and just have them lurking in the background. And then we have that great Beggars Canyon shot where you can imagine Luke coming down and blasting that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That Womp Rat that was sunning himself on the rock.
I loved it.
And they do these little touches, and it's almost in an episode that should have been like, I've seen all this before. This is drawn out. It's plotting. It's actually super interesting and engaging,
Yeah.
and it feels like you're seeing something new, even though you're not at all.
Right. Right.
And I don't know how they bottled that, how they managed to, but this episode just really was a home run. You
really
see it
was.
again in
Yeah.
every single scene. It felt like.
Yeah. So he takes the ship for a spin, and we get the Beggars Canyon shot, like Greedo just mentioned. Absolutely, I think any of us couldn't avoid picturing Luke flying down that canyon and blasting that Womp Rat sitting on the sunning itself on the rock like that. That was phenomenal. And then he ultimately
the reference to Beggars Canyon last season felt like too tacked on. This felt organic, like he just flew right over to it, and she said, "Hey, keep going there, and you'll get to Beggars."
Yeah, if you point between the suns, you'll end up in Beggars Canyon.
Yeah, there's a difference between going and saying, "Nudge, nudge, we're on Tatooine, Beggars Canyon," and just making it happen, and it works, and this just totally worked.
So he ultimately says, "Let's open it up and really see what she can do," and takes her into space. We get him flying by the basically the same ship that the sort of passenger ship that he took to Tatooine, with the same little Rhodian kid in there, and gives him a nod and a wave, which he didn't do when he was sitting behind him on the actual ship. And then he sort of buzzes the ship and flies on, and then he gets pulled over by the cops, just like he did in season 2 of Mandalorian. We got 2 X-Wings pulling him over, and ask, license and registration, the whole bit, and when he asked, did I do anything wrong? They said, yeah, you can't fly that close to a commercial starship like that. So we get basically, and I was unaware. I recognized the guy, but I couldn't place where I knew him from. But Greedo told me.
Let's ask Gundark. Do you know who the pilots were? Who the rebel pilots were?
We know who the one. We know who the one was.
The first one that talked to him was the actor who played who was the stand-in for Mark
the
Hamill.
body double for Mark Hamill.
The body double.
I didn't pick up on that. Yeah.
At the end of Mando season 2. And I thought that was really cool. And then, of course, the other one was the pilot, although I can't remember his name.
I can't recall the character's name, but yeah, he's been there
from Mandalorian, who helped, who stopped him the first time, but then helped
It's from
save
that
him.
Kim's Convenience Store show or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But I love how that guy was like, no, we let him go. Do you want to go back and fill out paperwork all day? It really felt like it was a day in the life of,
it really did feel like a day in the life of an X-Wing patrol pilot.
I've heard this guy's voice before. I saved him one time in this, he's probably okay. Just let him go.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting how he recognized him too. And he's like, "Do you sound familiar?"
Yeah. I know your voice, dude. I know your voice.
Yeah.
Placing voices has to be a very important talent in the Star Wars galaxy.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of how many helmets and
things,
exactly.
But again, it was another scene that just felt natural. The dynamics between all the characters.
Nothing about it was forced.
Yeah, it felt like that's something that would really happen in that universe, and the way they would talk to each other, and it was charming as well.
Right.
And anybody who's had a hot rod has been harassed by the police, rightfully so, I think. And so that gave you the fun, the nitro switch that she talked about, and you got to see that in action. And even the cops were kind of appreciative of it. They're like, wow, that was
because the one pilot, he's like, how did he jump? He didn't do his coordinates. All they're like, no, that wasn't a hyperspace jump.
Why don't we have that?
Yeah, exactly. Those were sublight engines.
Anybody else shocked by how much stuff Tatooine seems to have now? Like, they actually have a dedicated bus that goes back and forth, and they have cops that hang out in the atmosphere.
Yeah, apparently.
I would think you could call the cops and wait a month.
Right.
Someone's robbing the convenience store.
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive to what we've been told about Tatooine just being this dust ball on the back end of space, And
I did want to mention the bus line, which I thought was hilarious, that he has no Razor Crest, and this is so typical of this show. Nothing is unearned. Like, you're on the bus, dude. We blew up your Razor Crest. There's nothing we can do about it. You got to earn. You got to earn your next ship back. But I think that ring world and everything seemed much more at home with the mods to me. And knowing there's a bus line that goes straight between them, I wonder if that whole mod movement came from a place like
maybe
that.
Came from something like that.
Maybe some of these kids came from there for a job or something and got stranded on Tatooine, and just this whole thing, the mod movement kind of spread.
They're
trying to
make more. You're right. They would look a lot more at home.
They're trying to create more of a tech culture that doesn't really exist in these boonies.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, something like that. But
so basically the final scene of the show is when he returns to the docking bay, and Peli Motto comes up to him and says, "Hey, somebody was here looking for you while you were out. She said you knew her, but I told her you weren't available." And of course, it's Fennec Shan, and she's sitting, up on the edge of the docking bay, and comes jumping down,
using furniture the way she always does.
Using furniture like she always does,
or wherever she's sitting. Yeah, and making wherever she's sitting look 100 times cooler than it actually is.
Right. So she steps up and basically says, "Hey, I've got a job for you if you want it," and tosses him a bag of credits, and he knows this is for Boba, isn't it? And he just says he was going to do it for free. However, he has to run an errand first. He said, literally says, I have to visit a little friend first. So that's obviously saying that before he can take care of what Boba wants, he's got to go see Grogu. So we'll figure out what that means, whether we're going to get that next episode, final episode of the season, or is that a next season thing? So what final thoughts before we wrap up?
Final thoughts. I think Grogu's going to make an appearance in this show.
I do too.
An appearance. But I even wondered, although I think this is just a fantasy and this is way out there, I even wondered, since they were implying that Mando can't handle the Darksaber, but he's going to have to learn how to handle it because he's saddled with it, and he's saddled with the mythos of saving Mandalore, that he is going to need help from a Jedi. And I'm wondering if that might also entail bringing Luke into
that's my theory, is that when he goes to see Grogu, that somehow Luke's going to find out about the obviously he knows about the Darksaber, but find out about the trouble he's having, and he's going to actually show him maybe some way of how to wield it better.
So what's going to happen? Are they recasting Luke then? you know, and
Possibly, or they might just go with the same technology they've been using, you know.
but I don't know that they could have any extended sequence with that technology.
They
I
can.
think they'll just. I think
They
they'll just
can.
shoot it
I've seen whole
cleverly.
movies where they use long scenes of that de-aging technology.
You could even do weird stuff like have Luke have the training helmet on. You know,
Yeah.
like your eyes deceive you. Don't trust them, Grogu.
Yeah.
And they have extended dialogue with him training with Grogu with the helmet on, and all you see is the bottom of his chin or something. I mean,
So
there's
do
all
you
kinds of
think,
tricks they're going to use.
This may be going way too far, but it just occurred to me, could Luke even be brought into the saving of Tatooine?
I don't think so. That to me seems like small potatoes.
I don't think it will happen.
For
It'll
Luke.
also diminish Boba Fett. This is supposed to be his story.
Right. Then it's supposed to be his story. Then suddenly Luke comes in to save the day. Yeah. To me, it's like, especially if Luke is, as we think, he's starting his own academy and he's got maybe other trainees that he's not just going to drop that and go settle some sort of little bitty dispute on Tatooine.
Yeah. And the whole reason this is happening is because of Luke. Because he's the one who took out him and Leia and Han and all the friends took out Jabba. So they set this whole thing in motion. I don't see them coming back to it.
No,
it's for the side characters.
Could it be a training mission then for Grogu instead? Could Grogu play a bigger part in it?
Could be.
I'm convinced Grogu's going to be back with the Mandalorian. I was wondering how they're going to do it.
Yeah,
he's their money maker. And the fact that they built that chamber into the starfighter, that the starfighter's being kind of put in our face as the new look of how Mando's going to go on his adventures, then that just says to me, Grogu's got to be sitting in that seat sooner rather than later, because they can't afford to lose the viewership. So, I think there will be either Luke will say you have too many attachments, or you have too strong an attachment to the Mandalorian. You need to go resolve that first before you continue your training. I can't keep training you. Or he'll sanction it in some way like that. Or they will be adversaries and freaking Mando will steal Grogu. And he'll always have Luke on his heels, which would be interesting too. But I think Luke's got to know, with his connection to Grogu, that Grogu values Din Djarin and that he's not a threat or anything. It's just a different, how are we going to raise this kid? Jedi way or the family way?
But we were, Greedo and I were talking about this when you stepped out, Curly, and I'm not so sure that the Jedi way is foregoing attachments anymore because of Luke. Luke's
right.
a
I agree.
Jedi.
That's like the old way of doing it.
Yeah. So I wonder if Luke might not honor Grogu's attachment to Mendo and see that this is the best way to handle it, is to allow him to do good work.
I would love that.
That will help.
I would love that. And I think it would show the strength of Luke's character, but this show is doing a good job of bringing together all the different eras of Star Wars that we've been exposed to. And I think the book on Luke he's trying to recreate the Jedi Order. Yeah. I think that's just the Bible on Luke right now but we don't know because they haven't said, but according to The Last Jedi, that seems to be the Bible. Now there's years in between. Maybe he tried other things first, but I think
there's decades in between.
I think it could be confusing to the audience. I think they need to kind of set Luke on a path and have him there. And I think as the armor is the fanatic for the way, I think Luke will be the fanatical Jedi, not fanatical, but he will be more strongly, staunchly, I think, anchored in the Jedi way. It also explains why they're not going to have a show with him, or he has his own family and everything. Because if he's foregoing attachments, that means him too. I think he's going to try to set the example and be the guru on the mountaintop and everything. That's just my opinion. I have no idea. But also, I wanted to real quick say this episode, maybe more than any other that I can remember, this thing did so many things right. And despite my reservations about where the plot kind of went as far as backtracking with Din Djarin's character, I did want to point out that this episode brought together prequels, Clone Wars, Rebels, and
original trilogy,
Legends,
and the sequels, because they mentioned Faviers.
Yep.
She said it's going to be faster than a Favier, the stupid space horses. So, it's not significant, but it honors the sequels by using a reference or reminding us that they're part of this universe. It's like if you stop by Canto Bite or something, as much as I hate to see that. So, I mean, they really did a number of things to gel this whole concept of Star Wars as being distilled in this one moment of time. And that's pretty brilliant, you know. I don't know that
it was really well done.
I wouldn't have thought of that. Even when he said wizard.
None of it ever heavy-handed.
Yeah,
you know,
even when he said wizard at the end of the joyride.
Which I love that.
It's a perfect term. I mean, they found the perfect spot to use that word, and it wasn't cringy or
it
awful.
wasn't cringy, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And we've had 20 years since we first heard it, and we all cringed in our seats. To where it redeemed that, you know. I mean, it really did, and it reminded us we're in the same universe as the Phantom Menace, you know.
Right.
And that's okay, you know. Everything's cool. We've put it all together into this distillation of just freaking coolness, you know.
Yeah. And
quite an accomplishment.
I agree. So before we wrap, we got to give our ratings. I'll start this time. I'm giving it a 9.
Gundark, what do you think?
I'm gonna wait. You got,
I think I've talked myself into giving it a 10, and I have to after everything I just said.
Because you already shoehorned yourself in.
Yeah, when I think about everything they did with this episode, it's incredible because nothing happens really. We get some advancement of the plot a little bit, but nothing more than you could have done in 10 minutes. Yet they make it so delicious. It's just a freaking awesome Star Wars treat from beginning to end.
Yep.
And I don't know. I really think that there's something to do with give these people time. You know, they need time to properly structure the episodes that are polished really stand out. This one was polished. It felt perfect, and I can't fault it. I'm like Pontius Pilate. I find no fault.
Yeah, exactly.
I find no fault in this episode. So I guess I gotta give it a 10. I have to. They forced my hand.
Right. Very good.
Celebrate the glove.
Celebrate the glove. All right, Gundark, what do you got?
I'm giving it a 10 too.
Okay. Wow. For the first time ever, I'm the lowest, I think.
It is a jewel. And just like what you're saying, not a lot happens specifically. Like there's not a ton of action. There's a couple of cool ass action moments at the beginning.
They just they overcame so many things. Like you could say, don't have this much exposition in an episode. That's a kiss of death. It didn't matter.
Worked. Everything
didn't matter.
Worked.
Yeah.
It's
done right.
It didn't matter. Yeah. It's slow. We have the guy limping for the first half of the episode. It doesn't matter. Everything they did worked.
Not every episode that gets a 10 has to be the same.
Right.
No, and they don't all have to be Luke coming through a door.
Yeah,
you know, it's just perfect. It was just a perfect episode.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal.
What else can you say about it?
Really, really good. Yep. Absolutely.
So it's a 10.
10, and a 9. All right. Very good.
And they also, if you think about it, they just reintroduced the Mandalorian series. They told you everything without boring you or being repetitive. They told you everything you need to know about the Mandalorian series in one episode. They drew all these elements of Star Wars from different eras together, and you would just have to be a jaded prick to criticize it.
Well, it was
which
basically
I'm the man for the job, but
it was basically season 3, episode 1 of Mandalorian.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys. Well, that's it for this week. Hopefully, we'll have just as good a review for next week.
No more grumping.
Let's get back to this. Let's get back to this guy.
Let's get back to
that guy.
Yes.
Like a bantha.
All of it.
Like a bantha.
Like a bantha. So hit like, hit subscribe, leave us some comments, and let's talk about it. And we'll see you next week. Take it easy, guys. Yeah, 2 hours. I can't believe it.
I think you're muted, Corellian, Alan.
He just died.
I'm going to start overdubbing your dialogue.
He was silenced by the shock.
Keep talking. I don't understand what's going on over here.
Mm-hmm.
What has happened to your audio? I don't understand. Oh, get it, man. I don't know. What? Let me look down here. No, those are feet. The feet are both. There's a left and a right.